Good morning, everybody, and welcome to episode number 17 of Run It Back. I am very ecstatic to say that it's number 17. I love every week doing this show. I'm Menelik Fernandez. I'm your host, and I always start with the same way. So let me first give a big thanks to the Rising Coaches platform, which is crediting themselves as being the largest coaching tree in basketball right now with over 1,000 plus members. I just want to give a personal thanks to them for putting me in touch with and creating the network for me to be able to work with and learn from other coaches who value the game as much as I do. The premise of Run It Back we touch on every week. Basically, we take teams that have played previously and we run it back, so to speak, in a theoretical rematch. Just taking on the viewpoint of one of the teams and exploring what worked, what didn't work, what could have been done better, so to speak, and sharing the game with other coaches. So today we are looking at the Capital City Go-Go versus the Delaware Bluecoats from their March 2nd game, which resulted in a loss for the Capital City Go-Go of 105 to 102. We're taking on the Capital City Go-Go's perspective. I'll give you a little bit more background of the game in a second, but first let me introduce a very special guest today. We have the head coach of the Capital City Go-Go, Coach Ryan Richman, joining us today. Coach Richman just completed his first season as the head coach of the Capital City Go-Go. And prior to that, he's been with the organization for 7 years with stops as an assistant on Coach Brooks's bench. He's been in player development, in scouting, and of course in the video room. And prior to the Go-Go organization, Coach Richman was at the University of Maryland in a similar fashion to me, both on the women's and men's sides under Coach Freese and Coach Turgeon. So Coach Ryan Richman, thank you so much for joining us. I'm ecstatic to have you here. Really looking forward to today. I hope I can do you justice with that intro.
I hope I can live up to it. Thank you.
You're quite
I
welcome.
appreciate it. Yeah, that's a great intro. I didn't realize you also were on the women's side and the men's side, so that's maybe why we get along so well.
There you go. Yeah, when I was at York University, I did 2 years men's and then 1 year women's, and significantly changed my perspective on coaching because of how different but how similar the game is on both sides and the way that it's coached. So it definitely shaped and added value to the way I think of coaching. I'm going to do a little bit of background on the game here, just for anybody who didn't get a chance to take a look at what happened here. The Capital City Go-Go and the Delaware Bluecoats played twice previous to this game, once on November 19th, which was a win for Capital City, 125-105. And then once again on December 6th, which was a loss, 110-109. So they split games. And then of note coming into this game, I think it's important to mention that Delaware has a record of 20-18 coming in, and Capital City has a record of 21-19 coming in. So both the teams are hunting for that wild card spot, and it's 0.001 that's separating them coming in. So that being said, Coach, I like to start here all the time. How do you prepare for a game like this? You only have 3 days to prepare. You're coming off of a loss to the Kansas City Charge, who you had also just had a rubber match with. What's your scouting process? How many games out are you watching film? What's the weight of sets? What's the weight of matchups, et cetera? Give me a background of what you guys are doing at your level, please.
Thanks. So one of our coaches, David Noel, was in charge of this game. And yeah, 3 days for us in the G League is actually a good amount of time. Or in the NBA, it's a lot of time to prepare. And we were really approaching this game as a playoff matchup because it was obviously we're tied and basically tied, and the tiebreaker was on the line. So for us going into the game, our players and staff knew how important it was to bounce back from a game against Canton that I believe we got beat pretty handily. So just thinking about that, and we had been on a really long winning streak. So for us, it was really, we were approaching it like a playoff game. We were coming down to the stretch. We had a lot of our players from the Wizards, our two-way guys, and our assignments were playing with us. So we were excited about the matchup. Obviously, Delaware, they pose a lot of matchup issues that we'll get into, but they were were tough all year, a very well coached team, and they have a difference maker, right? They have Chris Kumaji in the middle as the 5, and obviously, again, we'll get into that. But when you put someone who is, and guys who've been in the G League know this, but you put someone who's 7'4", or the NBA, or really any league, but
Yeah.
you put someone who's 7'4" defensively, who's sitting in a big heavy drop, and it's kind of like you're looking around like, so what do we do? And it's like it's really intimidating in a lot of ways. So yeah, it was definitely something we prepared for going into it. How are we going to attack the drop? How are we going to try and neutralize Kumaji in the middle? And that's something we talked about. We did an okay job at it, but obviously, he's a difference maker.
So I'm actually very happy to hear you say those exact questions, because as a coach who's not coached at your level, but like if I was watching this game as I did, I pretty much the main question I'm asking is about the drop and what am I going to do and how do I neutralize them? So I'm happy to hear that my questions are on point. You mentioned basically that 3 days is a lot of time to prepare. Can you talk a little bit about your process of how you do prepare? Like, what does a scout look like at your level? How much of it is weighted towards personnel versus actions? And how is it delivered to your guys?
So for us, and I'm a big believer in it being more of a personnel type of scouting report, especially in the G League. Teams basically run the same things in a lot of ways, and they don't run a ton of pure sets. So from a scouting standpoint, my main focus and our coaching staff's main focus is really personnel tendencies. Like, how can we best combat someone like, obviously, we had Justin Robinson, for example, right? And Justin is someone that loves getting downhill, and we tried to send him to his right hand. He's a lefty. We knew him well, so we were trying to strong Justin. So something like that for us, we're a weak team, weak and ice team, but we tried to strong Justin going into it. So that's something preparation-wise. Like when we got back from Canton, we took the next day off, and then we had 2 days to prepare. I think we did a late shoot around, if I remember correctly, the day of the game, but that's where it's film intensive for from a personnel standpoint. So if it's your scout, it's your responsibility to put together a personnel edit that we watch in the mornings. Typically, if we don't have a late shoot around, we'll shoot around, and then in the evenings we'll watch sets, and we'll watch. And the best coaches I've seen, they pick clips that really matter. And what I mean by that is, you don't just pick a random horns clip, for example.
Right.
You pick a horns clip that has Justin going to his left hand downhill. So, and then it has Chris Kumaji getting an offensive rebound. So it's like you're getting your best bang for your buck in one clip. And those really, like, the best coaches I've been around preparing teams, they really tell a story. Like, their edits tell a story of how that team plays, and then importantly, like, how we've done against them in the past. And then last point is how we can beat them that night, like what we can do to put ourselves in best position to win.
That's amazing. For the person who's doing the scout, are you a proponent of less is more with telling that story? And would you weight your previous games or your previous matchups against them heavier than some of the previous games that they've had more recently? Because I know at your level, lineups can change dramatically throughout the season. So, like, what's sort of your philosophy on that?
It's a great question. I think that, like you said, lineups change, players change. But for me, I mean, as a head coaching, when I take the lens of a head coach, I'll look and see what we did against previous matchups against Delaware and how that helped us. And what hurt us against them. That's kind of the lens I take, and I kind of let the assistants, especially who scouted is, I let him kind of handle like the opponents, the recent game. So I'd like to have our coaches watch at least 3 games out.
Right.
As an assistant coach in the NBA, I probably watched closer to 5 games out, just because I think you get a real tendency on ATOs in the NBA level. I think that those 6 to 12 points are really important. So, and at the NBA level in particular. So that's kind of the way I look at it. And that's the way I break it up between being from a head coach to an assistant. As the year went on, like I went into the year as a head coach thinking I was going to make all my own edits and do everything myself leading into a game, but it was really, really difficult to keep up with. And I didn't think that I was using my time wisely. So I moved, especially towards the end of the year. It was, when did we last play Delaware? What worked? What didn't work? What ATOs were good? What can we tweak in our ATOs to help be more successful?
So, Coach, you led into my next question perfectly. Thank you for that. So, as a head coach, obviously you get to work with guys that you trust or girls that you trust, excuse me. And when you're not putting together all of the scout, how much of the work are you also doing on your own? And what do you do, like in terms of the delivery? I would assume that your assistants probably present to you before they present to your guys. That being said, what do you do if there's not an alignment? Do you make adjustments? Do you tell them to go back and revisit certain things? What's your procedure with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just big on assistant coaches having a voice and being in charge of scouts, because the G League in particular is a league in which everyone's there to grow. And I learned from Scotty Brooks, like when Scotty took the job, he gave the video room, each person in the video room, he gave them each 2 scouts. Right. And it was like I didn't sleep for days leading up to those scouts, right? Like people on this call who like have your first scout and you're like, holy, I see you guys, the guys who have their video on, I see you smiling, because like there's no other feeling like that. Like there's just no feeling. And it's just great preparation for our staff to be able to do that. So for me, like I'm big on the staff doing those things, because I just think it's what we're there for. It's like some coaches want to talk, but like head coaches want to just be the only voice, and that's whatever, that's their style, but that's not my style. So I want it to be collaborative. But I'll definitely jump in when I feel like I want to reiterate a point, or in the walkthrough portion, if I want to change up a coverage or look at something different, I'll definitely take control of that.
So going as specific as you want to, what did you really identify as the points that were going to lead you to victory in this matchup? What were the things that when you were going in, you were like, well, we have to do a lot of this and we want to prevent that? What sort of things popped up? And
yeah,
what personnel?
Sorry, keep going. Sorry.
I was just going to say, what personnel specifically did you want to attack, or did you want to give more action to, et cetera?
I mean, there's a couple things with Delaware when you look at them. Obviously, Mariel Shayak was really, really high level all year. And it's funny when you think about the matchup, we actually went to Delaware. We took a bus early in the season, probably in October, as our first preseason exhibition game, and we got blasted. Like we got blasted by 40. It was awful. It was like my first head coaching game, and I was looking around like, oh shit, like I don't know if I can do, like you just have these doubts like, wow, we are so bad, we can't do anything. And then so like every time we played them like a month later, and we went up there and beat them, and it was probably like looking at those 3 to 4 weeks was probably like my most proud moment as a head coach, when you're like, wow, like 3 weeks ago we lost by 40. Like I was doing math in the third quarter. I'm like trying to think about like carrying the one, like how many points are we down? Like I was trying to think about it, and I was just like, it's like one of those days. And then like 3 weeks later we come back and we beat them. So it's like when you realize like sometimes your messages and just like the galvanizing feeling of the group, it was really special. But getting back to your question, one thing Delaware did really well that I wanted to add is add to our offense is they're really good at passing the ball ahead, like off a make or a miss. Like they'll throw the ball ahead and then attack, which puts your transition defense obviously in a real bind. Obviously guarding in space is the hardest thing to do defensively. So for us, like we really locked into that in all of our matchups because it was such a big thing. And it helped keep us out of foul trouble. And it helped we needed to have the floor balance with them, obviously, first and foremost, because you got to protect the 3-point line. Mariel Shayok was elite three-point shooter. Jared Brownridge, people don't really know of. I know guys in the G League, TJ, you probably know like how dangerous he is. Like he's a guy that can make 6-7 threes on a given night. And someone like him, obviously really important to keep in check. And then, when you look at, and it's really personnel, because that's really what this is. When you look at personnel, when you have Chris Kumaji, when you have him down there, just offensively, it's like, what are you going to do? Like, are you going to settle for mid-range shots the way they want you to settle for on every possession, right? And that's really what they want, and that's what they're going to give you. And listen, I think there's time and place. You have to take those shots sometimes to keep the defense honest. You can't just only take threes against teams, because it's not realistic, in my opinion, that a guard like, so let's say we had London coming down. It's not realistic for him to not take a wide open shot, because we don't know what that wide open shot can do for his confidence, for his flow in the game. How can it help him defensively? Like, so all those things are important against the drop. And I really believe in a couple things versus a drop. One, when you're coming off the pick and roll and the big is engaged, you have to move on the perimeter, in my opinion, because all they want to do is sit in the drop, and then their wings are just going to go and flood out to the wings. Like they want to play the pick and roll 2-on-2. So I think our wings need to move, whether that be cuts to put pressure on the rim or relocation around the perimeter, so that you can get a catch and then attack on the second side. I think you need to run in transition. Biggest thing. And how do you run in transition best, right? You have to keep them off the foul line, right? Like you cannot foul, okay? And then, because you want to get stops, and once you can get stops, then you can run more effectively, right? And that for me is huge when you're playing someone like Taco Fall or Chris Kumaji, a big, who really impacts the game in the half court, but will struggle more in the full court. So running them. And then the third thing, I mean, obviously, I think you have to hit those bigs. And what I mean by that is you have to screen them in multiple ways. You saw our first ATO. The first play we ran was a play we ran against Taco earlier in the year. And we've also, I think we ran against Kumaji earlier in the year, where we're running a step up, he's in a drop, and we just smash. We call it a smash. Like Admiral just screened Kumaji. If you pull it up, the first play of the game for us.
I think it's right here.
Yeah, right here.
So it's a screen-the-screener type action, basically, and just smash them right into.
It's like a stack action, really. But my thing is, I think you need to hit those bigs and make them uncomfortable in multiple ways. So from a coaching standpoint, my thought process is like, Admiral, hit him. Like, even if you get an offensive foul, just hit him as hard as you can. I don't want him to be comfortable all night, and think he could just sit in a drop. So then the other thing is what Daniel Tice did all year. And really, Daniel Tice did a great job highway screening. I have an edit I could share with everyone. But his highway screens, we call it highway screens, where he holds his screen, the guard S dribbles, and then he goes to find the dropped big. And that became a big thing this year, if you guys know what I'm talking about.
We call it a Gortat up here.
Yeah,
I mean, it's Gortat screen.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing. I mean, really, and it's funny because I coached Marchin, and Marchin and John were amazing at that screen. I'm going to drop actually an ATO video I made, but I also have a video that I'd love to show you guys. I have some Daniel Tice stuff. I could drop it in after in the chat, but
if you want to share, you're more than welcome to. This screen share is open, and you've actually you've been so deliberate and elaborate with your answer that you've got certain things that I wanted to bring up at various points in there. I really appreciate where you're going with it. Thank you for being so prepared for this. My question to you is,
first of all, I love that you guys still call it a Gortat. So because there we go. Way to stay strong. There we go, Michael. I like it because he was really.
For the record, I'm Polish, and I worked on the Polish national team for 3 years.
Oh, nice work. So you work with Marcin? Oh, he's the best. He is the best. I love Marcin. And yeah, he was really like when we have bigs, and TJ knows probably from working with Stan, like he is the best screener still that I've ever seen. Like, he's incredible at screening on the ball and off the ball. It's like, it's such a skill. Like, we show all of our big still march in like edits and clips of like how you can screen better, his angles, because when you screen for someone like him and John got so good at their chemistry. And they did such a great job, because John, you have to be good with your angles because he's so fast that teams play off him and try and go under him. So your angles have to be great. So we still show march and stuff. So
can I go back a second? I want to touch on something that you talked about. You said that, like, as a base coverage or as a standard coverage, you mentioned early that you're more of a weak and ice team. So for, the layman, you're more of a sending them to their weak hand, and you're more of on the sides of the floor, keeping them on the side of the floor. For this game, I noticed you played a lot of drop, and I'm just kind of wondering why the adjustment, and what did you hope to get out of it? Were you trying to replicate what they were trying to do to you, or what was the goal there?
Well, for us, like, our week is a drop still. Like, that's right. The way we play. And I think that we probably brought the big up a little bit more on Marial Shayak, just because he's so good off the bounce. Like, his off the bounce threes and his range, he's got pretty good size. So we wanted the big to be up a little bit. And obviously, like with Kumaji, our thought was we have to tag him high. We have to tag him early. If you tag him late, if you tag him anywhere, really with him below the dots, it's going to be a dunk. So our thought was, like, when we do bring it up, and one thing that you just reminded me that we did go over and shoot around was if we needed to blitz Marial Shayak, like if we needed to blitz him, if we needed to blitz Justin. Justin was playing against us in kind of a revenge game. We let go of Justin, and he got picked up by them. So for us, like, it was.
I'm sorry, I think I got a blitz in here.
Yeah. And we were definitely, as you see in the third, like we're searching right now. Like, this is a playoff game. Like, we're really searching. So we moved up for a blitz, and if you see our weak side is pulled completely in.
Yeah, unfortunately. So what's your teaching point on when the weak side should be going back? Because I think he leaves the biggest guy on the floor. It turns into a dunk, obviously.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite lines is by Pat Sullivan, who always used to say, "The help can't get beat," right? Like, Jonathan Williams is acting as the help in this case. Like, he's blitzing, so like he can't get beat. Now, when he gets beat, we're all in a bad way, right? Like, right. So he gets beat on the outside on the foot race, and that's tough for our defense, right? I think obviously, if I were to look at it again, London's just got to stay there. But again, like, this is what makes it hard. Like, he's guarding the person that we've said in the corner, number 5, Jared Brownridge, who we're saying he is a knockdown shooter and we cannot leave him, right? So it's like, it puts us in a predicament. Obviously, you have to take care of the rim first. Like, first and foremost, you got to take care of the rim.
For sure.
I mean, now if you run that clip back, one thing I would have loved for us to do, and it might have been happening too fast, but if you freeze it, right, I would have loved if, I think the best teams do this really well, and it's quick, but if Jalen and London inverted, and we call that an invert, where they inverted, and now Jalen, the bigger player, can really absorb the roller, and now we can have the guard flying out to the shooters, and he could be the X-Man. Does that make sense? So really, we love our low and weak side to take the role when we can, right?
Right.
And then the high Jalen Jones here. So we're in pretty perfect position. The only problem is London's small, and we got Chris Kumaji. We got to make, when we talked about this in shoot around, as best as we can, we want our bigger players to absorb these roles, especially knowing personnel. Zaire Smith obviously has improved with his jump shot, but if we're picking our poison, we're going to want him to shoot the 3 as opposed to Jared Brownridge.
So would that be a right here recognition, or maybe even earlier as they start towards it?
As best as possible, it would be earlier, right? Like, it would be Mariel. He's not really a passer necessarily, so he's not going to whip the pass off the invert. Like, I'm not worried about that with him.
Right.
So we're trying to get the ball out of his hands anyway. If he does that and passes the perimeter, we're good, right? But this is something that is definitely intricate, and it would probably be as Kumaji's running up. We can invert it.
Right. And just for layman's terms, guys, just this guy and this guy switching. That's all he's talking about there. Coach, did you want to go through some of the drop clips with me? Just because obviously it's such a key point in here. There's a bunch.
Can you go above to Mariel Shayak? You switch to an ice.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was my question was this switch to the ice by design here because you stronged him? And I didn't see that coverage against him anywhere else in the game. And I just noticed it as an adjustment here. And they got the short roll and they got the ball to the second side of the floor.
Yeah, so I would have said that this would be more of a peel looking back from a note standpoint. So this is an ice. This is our ice. So freeze it. Pretty good. Into the ball. He could be into the ball a little bit more. Go, run it. Okay, our weak side's okay. Sko's there. He's ready to absorb. But here's my thing. If we know that Shayak is getting downhill, we call it a peel. Some teams call it a veer. And Jonathan Williams would pick up the ball, and then who was that on the – it was Jaron. Was that Jaron? And Jaron would pick up, and he would peel off to Clifford there. But we don't, and now we're obviously Jonathan Williams is trying to get back. Sko really takes his as the low man. He takes the roller, and now we're just a second late, and that's all it takes.
Right. It's interesting because at my level, mistakes like that long closeout, a lot of the time they don't get punished the way that they do at your level when they get exposed, I feel. So I feel for you a little bit where it's like, guys, we got to be a step faster for sure. And talking their drop, I got a bunch of clips in here. Maybe if you could just give us some of the teaching points or things that you see in it.
Can I jump in real quick, Menelik?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Ryan, appreciate you, brother. As
Jimmy,
always.
what's up?
Hey, just observing. Quick question for you on that ice where they didn't peel. Do you guys – was it kind of a natural thing for Sko to kind of go there? Do you guys teach that at all, kind of like the X out? Because it looked like – I don't know if it's Jonathan Williams or Cobbins on the big there, but, he kind of looked surprised that he took Clifford on the roll. I like that. I'm just curious. Like, we don't teach it, but he looked natural for Sko, and Jonathan Williams kind of like, oh, shit.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Sko did a really good job as the low man here. And to your point, I know he's short rolling.
Yeah.
So would I love if Sko, I don't think Sko necessarily needs to do it, but we're rewinding it and pausing it. So it's a lot, you know what I mean?
Right.
I think as the low man, Sko does a really good job here by picking up that role. And now Jonathan just needs to scramble. Like
Gotcha.
that's like Jalen's responsibility there is now first pass. Sko's body to body with him, right? First pass, and now Jonathan becomes the X out guy.
Gotcha.
He's got to go. But yeah, it's a good question, Jimmy. I think I'd prefer a peel there, but
Right.
Sko does it. We don't do it with Jaron and J3, and then Sko picks up the roller. So I think he's in the right position there.
Awesome.
All right. Drop, obviously such a big thing in this game, so we'll take a look at some of your stuff attacking their drop. So you mentioned keeping them honest. It's early in the game. What are your, we talk fairly frequently on here about shot selection and the shot selection spectrum and the mid-range being last and all of that. So how do you feel about where that is at this point in the game? And are you content doing it for long periods of time in the game?
It's funny. It's like the debate that lives on forever. I mean, it's
right.
it's like you feel great about it when it goes in, right? It's one of those things. No, I mean, for me, it's like, I think you can get into a trap if you're taking a ton of them early, and sometimes when you're making them early, it could be a little bit of a trap. But for me, like, Sko's in rhythm. He is coming off a screen, and he just like he feels like that's his shot. He's open. Like I'm okay with that for sure, and not just I'm not trying to. I think the important thing is not trying to play the result as much as possible. Like take the emotion out of it. If the ball goes in or does not go in, like how do we feel about it, right? So for me, obviously Sko was a second round pick for us, and like knowing personnel for us. Like we always talk about knowing personnel for the opponent, but it's also like when you're in the G League, like we have to know what this is about, right? We need Admiral to improve game situations and get better. So for him to come off in rhythm on this pick and roll and shoot it, goes in, make or miss, I feel good about it.
Okay. So you don't do anything, say like in practices or say when you're discussing this with players where it's like, you are this player, you are not allowed to shoot that shot, or you are this player, if you want to shoot that shot, you have to make this percentage throughout practices type. Like how do you arrive at the conclusion that different players are allowed to shoot different shots, basically is what I'm asking, I think.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's all about role definition. It's all about continuing a conversation with the team about, like what this is for in a lot of ways. Like it's for everyone, but we also can't lose track of the fact that it's for the Wizards. We're there to serve the Wizards. So like, and it gets tricky because would Admiral take that shot if he's playing with John and Brad, right? Like if he's playing with John and Brad, is he taking that shot against the Sixers with Joel's in a deep drop? Like probably not, right? And that's where the G League gets tricky. And that's where it becomes very, very difficult. And it's really important mentally, to your point, to have those conversations and continue those conversations. And we're lucky we're in the same building as the Wizards. So we're able to have those like there's probably a bunch of Wizards personnel there watching this game. So we're really fortunate to have that crossover and really have that open dialogue between the staffs and between the players.
So that's very interesting because like we've had throughout the weeks that I've done this show, we've had some very detailed conversations about this exact kind of thing, like the mid-range shot against the deep drop, against the drop, how much do we like it, what entails being allowed to shoot it. And like there's extremes even in this room. There's certain coaches that are like, absolutely not, you shoot it like you're coming out, just don't shoot that shot, we don't want it, period. And then that to me lends to the perspective of, all right, well, what counter do you make in those scenarios type deal. And it's just something that, of course, like you said, it's a never ending conversation, but I like to hear everybody's perspective as to how they're implementing what they're doing against it. And sorry, go ahead.
No, keep going.
I was just going to say, and we've got lots of clips here against drop, and you do actually end up shooting a lot of mid-range shots in this game. So like, I was curious as to what your philosophy is on it, is what I was going to say.
Yeah. I mean, going into the game, we're not thrilled like with just taking all mid-range shots against the drop, right? It's not our goal. But that comes with, you have to get out in transition. You have to put pressure with second side actions, third side actions, moving the ball side to side. Like you have to move him, right? And like our first two baskets were really against him. So how much does that create indecision with their staff too, right? Like now they're thinking, shit, like he's in a drop. Jaren just came down. We screened him. Now they came down. He made another one. Are they not starting to waver, but are they thinking about it too? Right? Because I'm sure they think about it. Like at the end of the games, he's probably not in the games, right? So I think it's a delicate balance. It's one that I'm still searching for an answer to be real and honest. Like it's not like I don't think it's a cookie cutter, one size fits all. Like you cannot take this shot. That's my opinion.
Interesting.
But I also think you have to be smart about not giving them a steady diet of it all the time.
Right. Well, I won't beat it to death. I'll show maybe two or three. There's one where you actually get a step back three against the late beer switch, I believe, if I've got it correct. And then this is an off-ball action, but similar type coverage, right? So it's coming off of the wide pin and just got a little floater in the lane. As you mentioned, not married to the result, but you're okay with it if it's in rhythm. And
yeah, that's going downhill. That's getting into the paint. Like we want we love the paint. We like the three. That's what we like to say. And that's something I've learned. But I think it's a George Karl Denver Nuggets that I might as well give him a footnote. But yeah, I mean that's the thought process is like how many times can we get in the paint? Like get a paint touch. Is it a paint touch shot? Can we get a paint touch to a kick out to an extra pass? And that's really what our goals are. So if he's making a paint touch shot, I feel good about it. Especially Phil going to his left, like his momentum's going left. Those are shots he makes all the time.
Do you have players on your roster that if you know that the other team is in drop, that you can move the screen higher on the floor and you know they will still go over every time?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's also a very good strategy, especially when you have a really good off-the-dribble three-point shooter. That's a really good strategy versus the drop. It's just to set it higher.
I think we have one here. I think I saw that somewhere.
Yeah.
And it just ends up with the open three, right? They're still going over the top. I'm just wondering if, from a scouting perspective, if you know they're going to go over every time on London. By the way, my daughter's name is London. I'm just giving a shout out to your player there. I think that's awesome.
Gotta love it.
But like, you know, when you set it higher, they're going to go over every time on a player like that type deal, or I mean, it's a great counter. I'm just wondering if you always get the result that you want out of it.
No, I mean, that was definitely one of the counters we talked about leading up to this game was let's move the screen higher and really set it. Like set it, hold it, and now we can get downhill. And if you have the three, shoot it. If not, try and get in the paint. You could even beat him, Nash dribble, and then we can get our perimeter movers and really get like a second side attack.
Can we talk a little bit, and I'm sorry to sort of be all over the place. Your answers are so good. You get some of my next questions type deal. But can we talk a little bit about adjustments you made first half to second half in here? I mean, you go to the half, you're down 3. And I've had a really interesting discussion recently just about like what is important in a box score is basically nothing. And there are other things that are more important. What is your viewpoint about looking at the box? What is important to you? And what kinds of things are you saying in the half at this particular instance in this particular game going in?
So for us in this particular game, I think halftime film is critical. Not all the time, but we watch halftime film almost every time. And like sometimes when the effort's poor, which didn't happen a ton, it's great to show film just to show like for the guys to see it, right? To really see themselves. And sometimes it's good to go in and be like, our effort sucks. Like, what are we going to do? What are you guys going to do? Are we going to change it or not? So obviously like we're down big in this game and we still come back. So it was a great game. But for us, like, I think the main things that we wanted to look at is how we were defending Shayak, how are we defending like Justin, and how are we nullifying Kumaji? And I think that like when we're behind, blitzing like really helped give us energy. I know I'm trying to read Michael what you're saying.
I was just going to read it to you as soon as you were done there, just because Greg I know is at work, so I was going to ask his question, then I was going to give a timeout to get Mike in there. But finish your thought, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's about really how are we handling what we talked about going into the game? Like, how are we defending the three-point line, specifically, like I said, Shayak, Brown Ridge? How are we defending Kumaji? And then really, like, how are we attacking them? So I think those are the things, like, you just want to reinforce for us. Like, we just wanted to reinforce our main points going into the game like we've spoke about.
Interesting. So, like,
and from a box score standpoint, I'll say this, like, especially when you're playing a team like Delaware, elite second chance team, offensive rebounding team, like, you have to look at those things in the box score. Like, again, I think your box score looking and your halftime has to mirror the main focus points for that game. And it reinforces like what we're looking for. So like if we're getting killed in second chance points, like we got to talk about it. If we're getting killed in points in the paint, we got to talk about it. You know, and the points in the paint is something I look for. Our turnovers are something I look for. And then are we getting to the free throw line? Is really, I would add rebounding too, but those four things in particular are really what I look for.
Are your guys, I don't know if this is a fair question, honestly. Are your guys good enough that you can just say, like, hey, we're getting killed in points in the paint? Or do you have to then go into more of the strategy as to how you want to rectify that type deal? And like, what are things that, like, in this particular game, what are things, hey, we wanted to look at our coverage on Shaq, so, like, we're going to change it to this? Or, like, what were the things that you, if you can remember, actually brought up with your team?
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it was just about switching up our coverage on him. Going into the game, like I said, in the walkthrough, we went through, like, different ways we were going to blitz him.
Right.
And how we were going to blitz him and what like we said, what our weak side is. Now, like we talked about, the help can't get beat, like that clip. But to Mike's question, like, that's something that, looking back on the season, like I'm continuing to do, rewatching the games, like I want to do better at mixing up coverages out of timeouts or on the fly. And that's something that I look at and I'm just like, wow, I need to get better at that as a head coach. Like finding those moments where you can blitz off of a handoff or a pick and roll, or even someone that's not Shaq, like even like Justin, who's obviously really crafty and good going to his left, but he's smaller. Like if he's a good passer, but he's smaller. If you put two bigger players on him with four hands on the basketball, like we talk about when we blitz, like he's going to have a hard time making that pass, especially if he's going to his right hand, right? So like those are some things that, Mike, like those are some things that I want to get better at. Do you jump to a zone, right? Like those different things.
I was thinking that pick and roll defense where you blitz and you wanted to exchange two players, you would have just naturally shifted to the zone for the last 8 to 10 seconds of that shot clock anyway, because then you're just denying the three-point line. You have your center in the midcourt anyway. But just to follow up on that, you mentioned Mariel. What if he's off the ball and you have one of those non-great off-the-bounce shooters? Do you just play your weak defense straight up and hope you start creating enough turnovers with that defense? Or are there other little things like a half-court or full-court press, or you might trap once or twice after an ATO that are helping create these opportunities to help create that run?
Yeah. I mean, those I totally agree. All those things are helpful. And I think one thing with him off the ball, thinking about someone like him, and we did it a couple times this year, but like even denying him touches. I mean, I know like Nick Nurse is, amazing at doing that with his box and ones and triangle and twos. And we didn't do that this year, but there were times going into the games where, and if a player was really lighting us up, we would just deny him. Like we called it like a white out, almost like, like the old fashioned white out. Right. So like you would just white him out, like completely take him out. Like don't let him get catches, deny him the ball, like all those things. And I think just disrupting their flow and rhythm is really what we're looking for.
Interesting. If you were to go back, would you have whited him out more type deal, or like what?
Probably. I think we did a pretty good job on him this game. Obviously, still he was 5 for 9 from 3, but we didn't really allow him to do much outside of that. But I think that was he 5 for 9? Yeah, it was 5 for 9.
Yeah,
7 for 18. Like he wasn't, he obviously made the big one at the end, but
right.
He didn't, which is tough, but really good player. That's what they do. So, I mean, I kind of live with that defense at the end, but I'm sure we'll get into it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you
I don't want to jump there.
I was going to ask you about the last 4 plays.
I don't want to relive the nightmare right away.
I'm sorry.
Live it later.
So I'll ask Greg's question for him real quick. How do you get guys to buy into team, in quotes, as each player I would think would have personal agendas to being called up? Obviously, you're about, a hop, skip, and a jump away from the NBA. You're in the same building in your case. So is that a problem, and how do you do it for you guys?
You just cut out. Can you hear me?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sure. The question basically was, how do you create buy-in among your players because they're so close to the NBA, especially if, I would assume, Greg means if what they want to do doesn't always align with what is best for the team type.
Yeah. Yeah, Greg, I mean, it's obviously, and I'd love to hear TJ and Jimmy, who've also, I don't know if I'm missing anyone who've been in the G League, but it's the hardest thing to do in the G League, right? It's no question. But I think the reality is you have to call guys out when they're being selfish. And it was actually before the Delaware game in the early season. We lost a game early. I think we were 3-2, and my associate head coach Dan Tashney was great, like real incredible resource for me and great friend. But he's like, hey, you have to call these guys out before we go to shoot around. And we like showed film on shots that we want, shots we don't want. And like, you have to call them out by name. You have to say their name, call them out. It was like the first time, like in a meeting, in a team meeting as a head coach, it's 6 games in that I'm calling guys out by name. And it was a really important turning point because one, like we won that game, but not because of that, but it's like guys need to hear. It's crazy. Like I've been around it for a little bit now. Like guys need to hear other guys get called out, bottom line. And they need to hear it by name from the head coach. And if they don't, and it's going to fester. Like I hate to use, like it's going to fester like a virus, like not to get into the virus stuff, but maybe that's poor timing. But it's like, it will like debilitate your team if you allow bad shots. And really, for me, like that's where it starts. Like it starts with bad shots because it becomes selfish and it becomes an avalanche of bad shots. And we're lucky we had a really good group of guys, but like everyone has those goals, to Greg's question. Like everyone wants to go to the NBA.
Sure.
We all, like everyone here. But it's not going to – being selfish isn't going to get you there. That's just like the reality. There's probably like – maybe we can count on one hand the amount of players that got called up from the G League that were like called up to be scorers. And just like making that – just like explaining that, like, and continuing to hammer that home, Like – I don't know, like, I didn't even know who Kendrick Nunn was this year when the year started. Like, had no idea. And, like, everyone who was in the G League the year before was like, yeah, he came off the bench for them. I'm like, came off the bench for them? What? And I, like, couldn't even believe it. Like, he came off the bench. That, like, shocked my soul, Like, that's amazing, though. Think about that. Like, all of those examples help us. Like, they help us as coaches. Like, guys like Michael Mulder and Duncan Robinson, all those guys. Like, that helps us and helps our case for that, because it's something you have to. I mean, and even Michael, I'm sure you dealt with it dealing with the national team, right? It's the same.
I was going to ask. I have a direct like example. I want any coaches to jump in. So I have had national team experience, pro experience, coach at the college level now. One of my players got Rookie of the Year last year. A very confident player, but really yesterday I was working out one player at the next level. Saw him, asked him, hey, when we working out, he messaged me, I'm not sure, what can you teach me? Thinking face. I'm just like, how do I respond by now moving into a second year? We just won the championship. I'm thinking he respects me a little bit more. It's at that point where he's like, I don't know if you teach me anything.
I want to
wow.
Yeah.
Probably not what you wanted to hear. Well, I mean, that's right. I mean, it's disappointing to hear that, but I think just showing.
I'll stay with the guys that have been working with me. So
yeah.
Well, I mean, we're in the same conference, and I have a pretty good idea who that player is. And I mean, ultimately, if you're not accepting of coaching, I mean, like there's certain people that think coaching doesn't matter, and I would vehemently disagree. It's kind of the premise of this show of why coaching does matter. And you can't be afraid to call players like that out and by name, just like Coach Richman said, right? Like otherwise it's going to fester with other players. Coach, if you don't mind, can we go through 3 or 4 of the last clips of the game? You kind of give me an idea of what you see and what changes you would make, if anything.
Yep.
I know it's not the ending that we wanted here, but if we were to run it back, how would we do it different? So we start with London and his big 3 that puts you back into it.
And again, like London was feeling it towards the end of the game. So for me, it's like my growth happened throughout the year. Like I want to get all tricky and all this stuff, but it's like, no. Put your best player in an angle pick and roll and have him do what he does well. Like there's no reason to get tricky, and I think like sometimes as coaches and I still need to like work on just simplify it, especially at the end of the games. Like He's feeling it. He looks good. I mean, look, Kumaji actually came up to try and challenge that shot, like, because he had been feeling it, right? But, like, again, this goes back to our adjustments we made before the game of if they're going to guard you out there, hold it, like hold your dribble and just move the screen up, right? And gives you more real estate. And now if you're feeling it like London is, now puts him in a bind, right? So he makes a huge shot here.
Ties the game up. And just like to your point, I mean, for those of you that are watching, it was a 25-8 run to get back to this point. And of the 25 points, I believe London had 12 of them is what I saw. So, I mean, obviously, just like you're saying, he's feeling it. He's in rhythm. Let it fly. After that clip, we go turnover, both sides of the floor. And then we're coming back down. We're tied. 24 on the game clock.
We had a shot clock violation, right? I think, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like those are the things that we just, like, can't happen. You know, you cannot – like, you get the ball back, you get to stop, and a shot clock violation is – I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world because it's not a live ball turnover, but it's not great. Like, you got to be able to get a shot off and a good shot at that. But continue.
I do actually think that if he didn't get the shot clock violation, you guys would have had a live ball turnover because I think, if I remember correctly, he had just thrown the ball away to the other team right as it was expiring. So
yeah, and I would obviously take the turnover. I mean, the shot clock violation over the live ball turnover, so at least they have to take it out of bounds, right? Like, I wouldn't want a live ball turnover. So, but I just, like, from my perspective, like, I need to do better putting the guys in position to get a good shot. And, like, the other thing is, like, we have 2 timeouts. So, like, you know, what am I doing? It's like finding the difference between going with a flow and just, like, calling a timeout. So
this would have been my next question here. You've rebounded the ball. You're coming up the floor. There's not much of a disparity between shot clock and game clock. There's 2 timeouts. And you decide to let your guys play it deep into the clock, which is, you know, I think the right choice. And do you guys practice end of game situations? Are they going to something they know? Or do you think they're just trying to attack a particular matchup right here? And, you know, for us, guys at lower levels, is this are you involved in this play call, or are you letting your guys just play here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna, like, for me, my thinking is, yeah, we have a timeout, but freeze it. Like, the ball is in our best player's hands in the last, like, he's been our best player this game. He's a winner in general.
Right.
You know, like, I feel really good with the ball in his hands. Who's to say I draw anything up that even gets the ball in his hands in this same position? Okay, so that's my thought process of not calling a timeout in this situation. Right. The one before is a different story, but this situation, best player has the ball. Keep it simple, pick and roll.
And do you call where you want it to come from, or does everybody know you're going to attack that big man?
Yeah, I mean, just like we'd call, like, rub 5. We just scored on it.
And so then my question becomes, as opposed to the pull-up 3, he gets in deeper and kind of gets himself a contested mid-range. How do you feel about it? And are you, like, obviously you're going to live with the results, I suppose, is not the right question. But, like, how do you feel about the shot? And do you think it could have been done a little bit better? In film, would you go through anything and touch on any points about it? Or
yeah, I mean, London and I talked about it after. He said he slipped, so he didn't have, like, good footing on it. But, like, you know, I mean, I don't necessarily love that shot, like, regardless. But he's like you said, he's scored about 12 points in the last, like, 6 minutes.
Right.
So, like, he's feeling it right now. So it's like, I just want him to shoot the ball, basically, out of anyone on that court right now, just because he's feeling it. You know, like, I know that there's feeling, like, the theories of, like, not having hot hand not being a thing. Like, I don't know. I believe in, like, players' confidence and rhythm, and I just think that he's feeling it. I want him to shoot it, right?
And I mean, ultimately, like you said, G League, end of the day, the goal is to get better, right? Like, this is a good teaching point for sure. The next clip, I mean, you're definitely not out of it at this point. This is the hard one to watch for sure, but I'm wondering, they've called a timeout, they've advanced. What are you said to your guys as they're setting up here? Like, are you switching 1 through 5? Are you Do you have some sort of semblance of what they're going to run or who it's going to go to, obviously, type deal? Or
I mean, our thought was it was going to go to Shayak for sure. The other thing I was thinking was potentially them. I think we were switching everything, not Kumaji.
okay,
But let's see like where that goes. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily go the way you want it to go. So yeah, I mean, we're switching everything, not Kumaji, and I mean, in reality, would we want someone bigger on him?
yeah,
Probably, but go back to it.
sure. So the switch is London
Like,
on.
he starts on Justin, right? So like Jaron does a good. So we have Jaron on him, who's our best perimeter defender. So they switch. I mean, pretty classic standard play. Miami loves running this play. They ran it a lot for Josh Richardson. I mean,
Hindsight's 2020, coach. I mean, it's not to.
He makes a tough shot over a hand. My only thing is, could we have someone bigger on him? That's the only thing I thought about. You know, like we're switching everything except Kumaji. And I thought that, you know, it's not, you got to live with that to an extent.
Yeah, it's a hard.
Hey, Ryan, question for you.
Yeah.
Something I've been thinking about too, and like I think we're pretty much the same boat of how we defended stuff 1 through 4, switch before everything. In a catch and shoot situation, sort of what this is, and something I've just been thinking about, curious to get your idea, is not putting your best defender on their best player because you know they're probably going to screen for him rather than like, you know, an ISO if it's catch and shoot situation. Would you think about switching matchups beforehand in hopes that you get a better switch?
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy, that's a great idea. And like looking at it, you could put Jonathan Williams on the ball, and then you could switch. You could put someone like Jalen on Kumaji, let's say, right? So like, then you could almost pre-switch it out. I'm just like, my thing is like Kumaji's so big that I thought that they would run some like sort of pin in underneath the rim and throw it up to him. So I wanted to keep like some semblance of size on him. But yeah, I mean, right. Your thought process isn't a bad idea because, you know, if you pre-switch it, like if you put your best defender on Kumaji thinking that he's going to screen, which he obviously is out there to screen, then you could almost like we said, like you could pre-switch it out. Like you're basically pre-switching it so you're creating the matchup you want. I mean, it's obviously definitely easier like now saying it, right?
Of course. No, for sure.
But yeah, it's definitely something I'm thinking about for sure.
And then, Coach, I just got one more. Last play of the game. You guys get a pretty good look with 0.3 of a second. I don't know what happened to the other 10. I'm just kind of wondering what your thought process was on the last play, what you had designed.
I mean, I figured they'd go zone because that's probably what any of us would do, right? Just like take away the 3. Right. This becomes a lot more interesting when it's a 2-point game, but I mean, my thought process is just, I think we drew something up to get them, but then once they went zone, we kind of just free flowed it, tried to get something open. Let me see it again.
Sure thing.
Thanks. Yeah, not like a terrible look, actually. No. All things considered. I don't even, 0.3 makes it just nearly impossible.
Yeah, you got to like volley the ball to the net basically at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I really look at it's not even the play we didn't show. Like the shot clock violation is really where I thought that we should have gotten a better look. I mean, and you can't really just like look at it like, wow, the last play. Like all things considered, like London played good defense, right? Like he did a good job on that. And it's just Mariel's bigger. And it's funny because they were teammates at Virginia, so it was definitely some little rivalry of sorts. But yeah, I mean, it was a great game. We went into it with a playoff game. It was going to be, as a playoff game, it had a lot of playoff implications. I mean, we ended the season, we were tied with them for the last spot, and they had the tiebreaker. So, yeah, I think that, and it was because that game wasn't impossible to make up, obviously, but, you know.
Well,
I think it was like a 3-way tie. We were ahead of Toronto, but we were tied with Delaware.
Coach,
Yeah.
one thing I wanted to really give you credit for is we touched on it a little bit here, and I showed the clip while you were talking when Mike asked the question, but like, I think it's under 7 minutes or right at 7 minutes. You're down like 15, and your guys are on the floor on loose balls, and like your guys have not given up, and that's great coaching in my opinion as well. I mean, not like for them to not lose desire to win throughout the game. You're obviously doing something remarkable with your guys, so I tip my hat to you. I want to end on this note because I want to be really respectful of your time.
No, it's all good. I would just say that's where your habits, and to Greg's question, like when you see guys diving on the floor and you see guys like we reward guys for taking charges, for we make sure we notice that. Like my big thing was like, all I want you to do is when one of your teammates hits the floor, like just sprint and go help them up. Like I always feel like you're a connected team if you do that. Like you always, and that was like always my thing. Like we practiced that. Like we practiced someone on the floor and like sprinting to go help him up, because that was something that at the end of the day, like the G League, like win, loss, like doesn't, like it's really important obviously for everyone, but it's a growing and development league. You just want your team to be connected. Like that's really my main goal was can you be connected? And for the most part, as my associate head coach would always tell me, the G League, almost every team is plus or minus 4. Like that's the G League. There's some teams I'm like plus 10 to 12. There's some teams minus 10 to 12, but for the most part, almost everyone is plus or minus 4. So it's something that I would have loved the last 7 games to see what our team was going to do. We had a crazy schedule coming up. We had like 2 back-to-backs in a row, like weekends. We had like a Friday, Saturday 1 week, the whole next week off, and then a Friday, Saturday back-to-back again on the road. So it would have been cool to see like our players be in those like playoff type games leading up to the playoffs. But it was an incredible experience, and just an amazing league too.
Yeah. You got a huge fan up here in Canada, and I'm a season ticket holder, so I'll be front row center next time you guys are up.
Love
it. I wanted to just I forget what point I wanted to end on. Sorry. Wow, wild. In any case, I'll finish here by saying a big thank you to Rising Coaches for the continued support of this creative venture and providing a network of coaches who want to learn and get better. And Coach Richman, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate this. This has been tremendous for me in learning and getting better from you. And as I said, you got a huge fan up here. If anybody else doesn't have anything that they wanted to say or a last question to finish it on, I'll go ahead and stop the recording there. Awesome. Thanks.